Hi everyone, Coldon here with another VOX Immortalis commentary guide. This video is for the Nefarian encounter in Blackwing Descent, and this shows the normal 10-man version. I've slowed the first phase of this fight down quite a bit. The rest of it's normal speed, but there's a lot to explain in this first phase, especially with our strange strategy. So as you can see, we drop down from the south side just to lower fall damage a bit, and then our tank picks up Onyxia. She has a bit of a strange threat issue, and I think it has to do with dropping under that pillar, because technically while you're up there she can't hit you, and so she kind of gets strange aggro sometimes. So your tank needs to be ready to taunt her if she switches. Otherwise we tank her with her side facing the raid and everyone stacks up. The reason for this is because, unlike most strategies, we actually soak up her electricity attack, which I'll explain in a moment, but you can see she's starting to crackle, and she will channel for 5 seconds an AE attack on everyone in the raid. That's on the side of her. But I'll explain why we face her that way in a second. So shortly into the fight, you'll see that these ads start spawning. There will be 5 total, and they spawn in random locations around the larger circle of the room. And they have normal threat, so for our strategy, as you can see, Nefarian just joined the fight a moment ago. And so he's actually tanked along with Onyxia by our Paladin tank. Most strategies you'll split them up, and the reason for this is because they have a haste buff that they gain, so they have 100% higher haste while they're within 60 yards. But because you have to manage the ads properly, we didn't have enough CC to really do it, and so we decided to try one tanking the dragons, and then as the other tank could get the ads, which you see I'm doing here. And that actually worked a lot better for us. It was more stable. So it's harder on healing, but you know, it works for us. The reason you want to keep the ads all together is because they spawn with 100 energy, and if you look at the bottom there, you can see 26 energy, 24, so on. Every second they will drain 2 energy, so after 50 seconds they will run out and they will de-animate, which you can see there. Basically they die wherever they were standing. You need them to all be right on top of each other, as close as you can get them, because of an ability in phase 3, which I'll explain in a bit. But that is why we ended up doing this single tank for the dragons and then the other tank on the ads. If you have enough CC and you can keep them all clumped up properly, then you can have a tank on each dragon and CC the ads together. But we just found that was very difficult with our raid makeup. So anyway, once they're all de-animated in the right spot, then I pick up Onyxia and bring her off to the side. Meanwhile, our Nef tank pulls Nef the other way. This gets rid of their haste buff finally, and now we have them split up. So Onyxia and Nef both have a breath attack, which is a 3-second channel. It hurts for a lot of damage on the tank, so healers need to be ready for that. There's also a tail lash, which has a huge radius, at least 45 yards. Basically, you cannot avoid it if you're behind the dragon and you want to attack or heal on that dragon. So it does around 25 to 45,000 damage depending on the armor of the target, but more importantly it actually stuns for a couple seconds, and you'll see where that is an issue here in a moment. Lastly, Onyxia has this lightning effect, which she casts pretty frequently. You can see the sides of her will sort of crackle, and then after 5 seconds she'll channel for 5 seconds, hitting anything to her side once a second with nature damage. So as you saw at the start, we had the raid on the side to soak up that damage. It actually does more damage than a single tail lash, but because we have 2 dragons, if we had faced them back toward the raid, then double tail lash would be worse than the actual electricity, because there's 2 stuns and the damage is still pretty high, that kind of thing. So you might see there our priest died, and that was due to partly my fault, but basically during the entire fight, if Nefarian gets to 10% portion of his health, meaning 90%, 80%, and so on, he'll use Electrocute, which hits everyone in the raid for about 100,000 damage or so, and you can't avoid it. And because of that, it can happen in conjunction with other dangerous abilities. So in the case there, Electrocute hit at the same time as a tail lash, from Onyxia, which is also a stun on the healers that are over there. And normally I try to turn Onyxia just so she's about to end her electricity, the side effect, so that if there's a tail lash following the electricity, it doesn't hit the healer. But because the timings are not exact, they're basically staggered. They can happen pretty much at any time, one after the other, so you never really know. And so in that case, I turned Onyxia too early, and that final electricity tick was enough to kill the priest. So it's just very, very difficult. And if you can do it, try to have higher armor healers on the Onyxia tank. Anyway, so we got our res and we're fine. So we're on phase 2. Once Onyxia dies, you enter this phase, and I don't have a UI element for it, but during the first phase, there's a bar that will show up on the default UI that sort of shows the charge level of Onyxia, and it gains over time. It also will jump in gain every time Electrocute is cast by Nefarian. So what we aim to do is go through 2 Electrocutes on Nefarian before we kill Onyxia. So we stop on her about 40%, we switch over to Nef, and then we push Nef to below 80% before this phase begins. Once he's below 80%, around 75 actually, we finish off Onyxia. And then this starts the second phase. So you can see the room fills up with lava, and there's 3 pillars around the room. They're very far apart, so you need to split up your raid evenly pretty much. You need 1 healer, 1 person that can interrupt, and then whatever DPS split you want for each pillar. So you can see here we have a Warlock, Shaman, and myself. And this phase is very difficult. The lava is kind of tricky to get used to. You will need to get out of it quickly and jump up on the pillar, because it has a stacking dot that will apply. And then the adds that are up there, they don't do any melee or anything, but they will cast Blast Nova fairly frequently. So that's why every interrupter for each pillar needs to interrupt every Blast Nova, otherwise it will channel and hit the raid really hard, basically kill you. So if those things are covered, then the only other thing is Nefarian will use a Shadow Volley attack very frequently on this phase, and it casts on random players. A lot of people think there's an AE effect, but you can check the tooltip and such. There's no AE, so it doesn't matter if you stand on top of people. But because it's random and it's frequent, it can appear that it's hitting the same person over and over, or multiple people. But basically, that phase is all about healing. So if you want to just get through it quickly, have your DPS all focus on the 3 adds that are on the pillars, get them down, keep interrupting, and your healers just need to do everything they can to be efficient. Because you can attack Nefarian during that phase, if you choose to do so, you can get him below 70%. You'll get an Electrocute though, and because that's 100,000 damage on the raid, it's very difficult during that phase for the healers to keep everyone topped off. But it's doable, and we tried strategies with that, but we found you can actually go into this third phase at 70% and still be fine to finish the fight. So if you're learning the fight, I recommend doing it this way. So anyway, you see that we're now into the final phase where it's just Nefarian, and we switched tanks, so I'm on Nefarian, and our paladin picks up the adds. The adds get reanimated because Nefarian will cast Shadow Blaze on a random add, wherever it is animated or not, and it drops a flame effect on the ground. You can kind of see on the right there. They will slowly travel around. They kind of prefer to chase people. And if they hit an add, it either revives that add if it's dead, or it fully regenerates its energy. And that's bad because the adds will actually gain a stacking buff over time. Each stack increases their damage and I think movement speed by 10%. So if you look in the top left, the adds are deanimated. And the reason for that is because our paladin tank is watching for when Shadow Blaze is coming and moves the adds just as it's cast so that it doesn't land on them and regenerate their energy. So they're stacked up, now another blaze is coming, and now they're reanimated. One thing we sort of forgot to watch for is they reset their threat after they animate, so make sure your tank is ready to pick them up. Anyway, so that process should repeat. As the fight goes on, the Shadow Blaze casts become more and more frequent until they get down to 10 seconds. So it becomes a little bit harder for that tank to avoid it. Still, the main challenge is really control of the adds in this phase. Nefarian is very simple. Just you tank him, everyone else stacks to the side. He does Electrocute every 10% of his health. So all your healers need to do is keep everyone, get everyone back up to full after Electrocute before the next one hits. Otherwise, you just heal the tanks. So really, it's all about controlling the 5 adds here. And so this part needs some practice, but basically just watch for the Shadow Blaze when it's about to happen. Once you get deep in the phase, just you can use your add-ons or just keep track of a 10-second timer. And when it's about to cast, start moving the adds. And if you get them to deanimate 2 or 3 times, you'll have no trouble, really. If you don't, if you get hit by the blaze, then the adds are going to do some insane damage, especially with that combination and Electrocute. It can be pretty deadly. Another thing I didn't mention, but you should be aware, is that both the Dragon Breath effects also will reanimate adds. So during both the first phase and this third one, if the adds are low energy, you don't want them to get breathed on by a dragon. So the tank, and generally you'll want one healer helping that tank, so we have a paladin helping him out. They need to be aware of the tail of Nefarian when they pass the back. You can choose to face Nefarian's front during that time, but because breath will regen the add energy, we found it was actually better not to do that. So you can see here Nef's getting pretty low, and our paladin tank is actually going to die here in a moment. I think Electrocute from Nefarian combined with add damage does him in. So here's the final Electrocute at 10%. Yeah, and then he gets tail swiped, which stuns him, so he can't dodge or parry or anything or block or anything. And that's finishes him off. But because Nef was so low, we're able to just burn and finish him out. You can root and stun and stuff the adds to buy yourself time. But otherwise, I mean, there's really no reason you can't keep this going pretty much indefinitely. So just practice on the add control, and that's really all the third phase is. So that was Nef. Good luck, and thanks for watching.